Hey everybody, I'm Mike Hagan. You know, one of the things I love to do in my vlog is talk about gear that I use, and I love giving people input on my experiences with gear. You know, I've been a longtime shooter, a longtime Nikon shooter, and most of my lenses right now are Nikon lenses. Recently, like within the last year and a half or so, I purchased the Nikon 200 to 500 millimeter f/5.6 lens, and I've been around the world with it twice now. I've taken it to Iceland a couple times. I've taken it to Africa. In fact, I just came back from an Africa trip a few months ago, so I have a lot of experience with it. I want to share with you things that I think are good and things that I think are not so good about this lens so that you can make a great purchasing decision. Starting off, one of the first things to know is that it's a 200 to 500 millimeter focal length. You'll notice when you zoom, the barrel extends and contracts when you zoom. Now that's different from something like, let's say, the Nikon 180 to 400, which is all internal zoom and internal focus. And what does that mean for us practically speaking? Well, if you're doing, let's say, tripod photography like I have shown here, a lot of times extending that barrel will cause a balance shift. And so maybe you're using a gimbal or something like that. You may have to try to rebalance the camera depending on the zoom setting of your lens. It's not that big of a deal though when you're hand holding, or maybe when you're on safari you're using a beanbag. I don't really worry about that lens extending and contracting. Next, let me talk about the switches that you have available to you on the 200 to 500. First one on top, you've got your manual / autofocus switch. So you know, this is an AFS lens, in other words, silent wave motor. So in autofocus mode, you can still rotate the focus barrel to manually focus. That's pretty cool. Next switch down is you got your focus limiter. Basically allows you to focus from the minimum focus distance to infinity, or you flip that focus limit switch and it limits focus from 6 meters out to infinity. Next is VR. So the lens has VR on or off. And then of course you have two options for VR, and one is normal VR mode and the other is sport VR mode. So you got a lot of options there with the lens. The last thing on the lens barrel is you have your barrel lock, and it basically locks it out at 200 millimeters. The whole reason why they do that is because a lot of times when you're holding the camera with the lens down, you can lock it so the barrel doesn't automatically extend. So that's a nice functionality. So let me talk about the performance of the lens. You know, overall, what you're getting or what you're paying for is flexibility. This lens is about a $1,400 lens. Maybe it's $1,300, I can't remember exactly, but you know, for less than $1,500, you've got a lens that gives you a ton of flexibility. It's basically a super zoom, a Nikon branded super zoom for less than $1,500. Optically, it's not great. You know, it's not as sharp as maybe my primes are. It's not as sharp as even like the pro level Nikon zooms, like the 200 to 400 or the 180 to 400, but it's sharp enough. And I know this for a fact though. If I'm shooting, let's say, a product for a client, I'm probably not going to go to this lens. I'm probably going to either rent or use one of my other lenses, one of my more professional level lenses. You know, for example, the Nikon 180 to 400, that lens is what, $13,000, something like that, but it's sharp as a tack, and I know it will be sharp as a tack. Autofocus on this is not super fast either. Now, that said, I've taken it all around the world and I photographed all kinds of wildlife with it, including puffins in flight, seagull or seabirds in flight, Galapagos birds in flight. I photographed wildlife on the Serengeti in Africa with it, and it's been able to pretty much track all the wildlife I've thrown at it. The autofocus speed is adequate enough for it to work for my photography. So overall, you know, I recommend this lens. I think it's a great value, and I think that's the right terminology to put it in. It's a great value lens. It's not the best performing lens, nor is it the least expensive lens that you can buy in this genre, but for Nikon shooters who want a Nikon lens, it's a great value. I highly recommend it. You know, I use it all the time on my Nikon D850, which is a full frame sensor. I also use it quite regularly on my DX cameras, like this one here. This is a Nikon D500. When I mount it on the D500, it changes the equivalent focal length from 200 to 500. It changes it to a 300 to 750, which is fantastic. Again, overall, I like it, I recommend it, but just know what you're getting for your $1,400 and know you're not getting $13,000 lens quality for a $1,400 lens price. Thanks for watching. Hope you have a great day.